Hello, I'm Thomas from Geon Technologies, and welcome to this Sandbox session for devices and ports. To follow along with this Sandbox, you will need to implement the simple TCP and simple GPS devices we created in the previous two tutorials, and you will also need the socket sign function from the Geon Tech GitHub repository filed under Training for devices and port connections. The goals of this session are foremost to gain experience with Aussie Utils Sandbox. With it, you'll be able to gain administration experience by learning how to launch devices, view the model's API, connect ports implicitly and explicitly, as well as plot some data. So let's get started. Here you can see the desktop of our training virtual machine, and in the REDHAWK Eclipse workspace I have my two devices ready to use. I also have the socket sign function from our GitHub repository, which we'll later use to drive the simple TCP device. While the IDE does provide a sandbox, REDHAWK 1.9 limits you to only sandboxing components, and only those deployed to the SDR root. The Python shell, on the other hand, lets you launch entities with relative path names, absolute path names, as well as devices. First, let's change directories to our workspace and start Python. Next, from Aussie Utils, import the sandbox SB. This gives us access to several sandbox features. One of those features is the launch command. To it, you provide the SPD file of the component or device you want to launch. You can also add exec param configure and allocation property values similar to how it would be deployed in a node or waveform, or later configured and allocated by an actual component. Next, we'll launch simple TCP and simple GPS with their defaults. Here I've used the API method on simple TCP to get an easily readable view of the device. All of these things should look really familiar to you if you followed the tutorial. These two devices were designed to exchange data using the front-end GPS interface, with simple GPS being the provider and simple TCP being the user. Since there is only one way to connect the user and provider, this is considered an unambiguous connection, and the connect method requires no extra arguments. Next, we want to plot the data, so we'll use the sandbox's built-in line plot. Plots can connect to both the users and provide sides ports for monitoring the flow of information in your system. Since simple TCP only has one bulk I/O port that can possibly be connected to the plot, the connection is also unambiguous. However, for the sake of an example, I'm using the user's port name argument to explicitly define which of simple TCP's output ports to use for the connection to the plot. Everything launched from within the Python sandbox must be started if it is not designed to start automatically. So here we start the plot. Additionally, the sandbox provides start and stop commands on itself for controlling everything that has already been launched. Now we can use the socket sign function from the GitHub repository to stream a sinusoid into our running simple TCP instance and plot the result. If all goes as planned, you should be able to control the frequency of the sinusoid and see the changes immediately appear on your plot until the script exit, which is about 30 seconds or if you press right. That brings us to the end of this sandbox session. You can use Control-D to exit the Python shell, which would then terminate your running instances. So a quick recap. We covered how to access the Python shell and the Aussie Utils package to prototype a node, in a sense, by launching its devices. We used the API to verify one of the devices is what we were expecting. Then we used implicit and explicit connections by joining our devices together, as well as the TCP device to our new plot that we created from the sandbox. We then drove the whole design using socket sign function to verify our connections were working. Once again, I'm Thomas with Geon Technologies. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to contact us for more information about REDHAWK, including in-house training on a variety of topics.